Hello, and happy marvelous everybody. Hey y'all, hey, happy Monday, happy Monday. Listen, I'm excited that you are joining me today. Listen, April is National Fair Housing Month. And so, of course, I thought it would be fitting to come and share some information that will definitely be helpful for a lot of you who are landlords, who are housing providers, for those of you who are managing property on behalf of others. I promise this is definitely a segment you want to tune in and take special notes on. Also, I want to get some engagement today. I want your participation, and so I'm going to touch on some things, some costly mistakes to avoid making, fair housing mistakes to avoid, right? But if there's something that maybe I don't cover, I want to get some feedback today. I want to have you to add value, if you will. And so if you are a tenant, you can just relax today, just kind of tune in and just ear hustle. But of course, if you have questions, comments, remarks, or observations, go ahead and drop it in the comment section. Thank you for watching live on Facebook, on YouTube, and LinkedIn. Listen, I am Karissa Spann, the abundantly blessed landlord and tenant expert. And this is what I do each and every Monday. I bring information to help the entire rental community. I'm usually talking about topics or subjects relevant for landlords as well as tenants to positively improve the rental community. But because April is National Fair Housing Month, I want to speak specifically to landlords and housing providers today. So before I get into the discussion, let me know where you're tuned in from in the comments section, whether you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, or YouTube. Let me know where you're tuned in from. I love to know the jurisdiction. Let me know which platform you're watching on. Show me some love in the comments section. Say, hey, girl, hey. Let me know that you are here. All right. And so I do have an agenda for today for the remainder of April. So next Monday, I'm going to come back. I'm going to give some more tips and information. I'm going to share some case studies. Some are live situations that are actually happening where landlords made costly mistakes and it was not the best for their rental property business. And so it ended up costing them thousands of dollars. And so my goal is hopefully to help some others, some of you, to avoid going down that rabbit hole. Listen, showing up each week costs you nothing but your time. If you find that if the value that I'm giving, if you find that someone else may benefit from it, please like, please tag, please share it with others. Okay, sharing is caring. That's one of the things that I always say. Hello, Kim. Thank you so much for tuning in from South Carolina. Hello, I see you tuning in from the YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Hi. Hello. Hi, Miss K. Thank you for tuning in from California. I know that we are in different time zones, so thank you for tuning in from the East Coast. All right, so today, Kim, I want you to chime in. You're from New Jersey. We have New Jersey in the house. Okay, thank you so much for tuning in. Glad that you are here. And so today I'm talking about costly mistakes for landlords to avoid. Okay, I just also want to say and put this disclaimer up that the information that I share is not legal advice. However, it is the industry's best tips and practices, especially for landlords to avoid. Okay, just wanted to put that in there. So today is all about costly mistakes that landlords should avoid making. So before I get into that, let me just explain. For some who are not landlords, I do have supporters who tune in. They're not landlords, right? They just show up to support. Fair housing came about in 1968 to avoid discrimination in the housing community. So it's not specifically for the rental, but it's also for the sales. But because I specialize in residential rental, all things residential rental, I'm specifically touching on the residential aspect of the fair housing laws discrimination. Because ultimately, like I said, my goal is to help you avoid being sued for making mistakes. Now, here is what I do want you to also know about the Fair Housing Act that came about. Now, discrimination, it can be intentional, but sometimes discrimination can also be unintentional, right? And It's usually those mistakes that landlords or housing providers make where they unknowingly said something. They unknowingly treated people differently, although that was not their intent, right? And I also want you to know that because it is National Fair Housing Month, that a lot of agencies throughout the United States, there are a lot of agencies and organizations who have testers. As a matter of fact, I have seen a lot of job announcements um, for these companies or organizations, if you will, who are looking to hire testers. A tester is someone who will go out and they will pose as a tenant interested in renting from a landlord. They'll ask a series of questions. Now, here is one indicator that you may be tested if you're a landlord, if you're a property manager, or if you work for a property management company. Okay, let me just put that out there. You could be an assistant manager, you could be concierge, right? Discrimination is not predicated on just the owner being sued, right? It could be the owner, it could be anybody in the company that is violating the fair housing laws, right? So it's not specifically, let me just restate that. It is not specifically or only for the owners. It can be the owner, it can be the property manager, it can be the assistant manager. Now, here's the thing. When a case is filed, when when a fair housing claim is filed, it could be against you as a person, it could be against the company. So I don't want people to think that, oh, well, if it happens, if I work for a company, it's only going to impact the company. No, it's going to mention you as well. So please take note to the information that I'm sharing with you today. I know that many landlords, especially those of you who self-manage your property, sometimes you find yourself in trouble or in the hot seat because of what you don't know. If you have never, ever taken a fair housing class, please do so. In many jurisdictions, those fair housing classes are free. I've taken a certification class to get my certification under fair housing, but I'll still take a class if it's free. As a matter of fact, I was just on a webinar last week because I want to make sure that I'm relevant, that I'm providing professional services. And here's the thing, the laws are always changing. Things are never the same forever. And just because you may have awareness or maybe you have knowledge, right, from let's say 1, 2, 3, or 5 years ago, something could have changed and you might need to know what that change is today if you manage rental property. If you are in any type of way remotely close to being involved in property management, residential rentals, you definitely want to stay on top of fair housing laws. Find out if there's a class that you can take in your jurisdiction, in your area, whether it's South Carolina, whether it's New Jersey, whether it's California. But now let me just also add this because I do have tenants who watch. Tenants can also take a fair housing class to find out what their rights are as a tenant. And many tenants, a lot more tenants are now recognizing and realizing that they have rights. They understand more and more what landlords can and cannot do. And that's why it's so important that as a housing provider, as a housing professional, that you are up to date with any changes that have taken place in federal and state as well as local laws, because things are always changing. And like I said in the beginning, discrimination, it can be intentional and it can be unintentional. So that's why it's so important. And that's why in 1968, they came about with this act because they realized that a lot of people were being discriminated against. And there are protected classes. There are 7 federal protected classes. Now, that's just on the federal level. There are also going to be state and local laws that you have to be aware of. So for instance, Kim, you're in Charleston, South Carolina, right? So there are federal protected classes fair housing protected classes on a federal level, but then on the local level, there may be additional protected classes, as well as in New Jersey or DC. There may be additional things that you have to know on top of the federal protections. So I know that DC has added quite a few to their list. A lot of jurisdictions, a lot of states, a lot of places have also added protected classes. And so you want to know what they are for the area that you manage or own rental property in. All right. So I just wanted to put that in the way. But today, let me just share some case studies, because some of you know that I'm a housing educator, so I teach property management. So I'm passionate about teaching, right? So, but let me just share. I've touched on what a fair housing tester is. Some of these people, that's their full-time job. But here's how you know that you're being tested. So remember a little bit earlier, I said that there's going to be they're going to be very specific with their questions. Here is a question that they may ask. And if it's something that I don't share, drop it in the comment box and I'll share it. So for instance, if you have someone who comes to you, now usually testers will come out in twos, right? So before I get into the specific example of what they might say, here's how the testing system works, right? They'll send out two different categories of people. So it could be an African-American female and it could be a Caucasian male. They look completely different. They're going to ask the same questions, right? But they do that because they want to see if you treat one category of individuals different from another. You may have someone who is elderly. I had someone who came into my office and I believe they were testers because they asked the same questions. And I teach this, so I just kind of laughed when they came in and they specifically asked the same questions, right? And so they're going to look different. They're not going to look the same. You may have someone who come to you who will say, okay, well, I'm looking to rent a 1-bedroom and it's 3 of us in our household. Now, of course, as a housing professional, as a housing provider, please never ask people if there are any children. How many children will live in a household? Please never ask about children, okay? One of the things that I always ask, and I'm intentional and I'm very thorough with my questions because I want to know how I can best assist people. But I will always ask, how many people will occupy the rental home? I'm not asking how many adults. I'm not asking how many children. Never ask how many children. That's important because if for any reason that application is denied, you don't want them to come back, file a claim against you because maybe it comes across as if their application was denied because they have children, right? So familial status. So family is one of the protected classes or protected categories. Never ask applicants, never ask a prospect how many children will be in a household. So let's say, for instance, a tester comes to you, there are 3 people and all 3 don't show up, but they'll tell you, oh, well, there are going to be 3 people in the household in a 1-bedroom apartment. Now, you should also know what occupancy laws are in your jurisdiction. Occupancy laws are in place to make sure that overcrowding does not take place in that rental property. So I'm going to use Washington, D.C. for instance. Washington, D.C. occupancy standard says that there could be, in a 1-bedroom apartment, the maximum amount of people can be 3. Now, this is just a straight rental. This is not any type of housing program. Housing programs may have special rules and stipulations that are added on top of this. I'm just talking about a straight rental. So the occupancy standard is 3. Now, I know some people may say, well, Karissa, I don't want 3 people in my 1-bedroom. That's just too many. Well, I know what you may or may not want, but the laws are what they are. So Here is the setup. It would be 2 per bedroom and 1 in the living room, which could also be considered a sleeping quarter, right? Not necessarily a bedroom. So please keep that in mind. So using that same example, let's take a 2-bedroom rental. Using the same standard that I just shared with you for Washington, D.C. If you have a 2-bedroom in Washington, D.C., based off of the information that I just shared, okay, what is the maximum amount of people that you believe can occupy a 2-bedroom according to the standard that I just shared? Because let's say you have a 2-bedroom, and I want you to just think about this before I ask the question. Let's just say, based off of the standard that I just shared, a group of people want to rent a 2-bedroom apartment. Okay. I see your comment coming in. Thank you so much for that. So a group of people want to rent a 2-bedroom apartment in Washington, D.C. based off of the standard that I just shared. You said 5. Thank you. And there is 6 people, right? They want to rent a 2-bedroom apartment in Washington, D.C. Is it possible for them to rent? I see your comment. Thanks, Kim. A 2-bedroom apartment in Washington, D.C. 6 people will occupy that space. Is it possible? Yes or no? Is it possible for them to rent a 2-bedroom? 6 people in a 2-bedroom. Is that possible? All right. Thank you so much for that. So I saw your comments coming in. So given the standard, Washington, D.C., 1 bedroom, you have 2 in the bedroom, 1 in the living room. So let's say, I see your comment. Thank you for that. So let's say you have, like I said, you have 6 people that want to rent a 2-bedroom apartment in Washington, D.C. So you have 2 in 1 bedroom, you have 2 in another bedroom, and then you have 1 in the living room. So if it's 6 people that's trying to rent that space, they won't be able to do it legally, right? And you have to know what the occupancy laws are. Now, I know that that might seem like a stretch, 5 people in a 2-bedroom apartment. And I've seen, many of us, we've seen more than that. We know that people will be people, right? And things happen, situations happen, and families, they come together. I get it, but you have to understand what the occupancy laws are. And so before you flat out deny someone, know what the occupancy laws are. You don't want to have any complaints filed because you're discriminating. Because if you understand what the laws are, you can defend what you know to be the law, not what you think, but what you know. So in a situation where, like I said, I had a couple who came in, I believe they were testers. They asked the same question. Here are some of the questions that they asked. And they came in on the same day. So that's why it was a little intriguing to me. So one came in the morning, one came in the afternoon, the same day. Now, testers, they may come the same day, they may come the same week. They're going to come close in range, right? So I ask up front, how many people will occupy the rental property? Just to make sure that before I waste their time coming in, or before I waste my time showing them rental property, that I understand the dynamics of what is going to allegedly take place. So here's some of the questions that they asked. What kind of people live here? Right? So that's the first question. They asked me, are there students? Are there a lot of students who live here? Is this a safe rental community? Like I said, they asked the same questions, the same questions across the board. Please never, ever answer that question. What kind of people live here? People who qualify to live in this rental community occupy, they live here. Or you can just flat out say, fair housing laws prohibits me from answering that question. That is the safest way to respond. When you don't know, when you're skeptical, when you're not sure, you're just not certain, like, this might be a tester. When you know the law and you know that you cannot answer in a specific way, just go ahead and say that, because that's the safe thing to say, right? Please never tell anybody that it's a safe community. And it doesn't matter if you have cameras, you can have a secured building where there's an intercom system, and you have some rental communities, you could even have officers or security officers, security guards, right? You can have all of those things, but never ever promise anybody that it's a safe community, because you cannot control what may what may happen, right? You can't control crime. So never ever promise that, and never ever tell anybody, oh, it's a safe community. Never ever answer the question, what kind of people live here? Please don't do that. Never ever ask, hey, Ben, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm coming to you. Never ask if applicants have children. You can ask how many people will occupy the home. And of course, you will know if they have children before you even sign the lease, because if it's your application policy to have every adult 18 and over to complete an application, you already know those things. But please never ask people how many children they have. Please never ask people if they tell you that they are disabled. If they say, I have a disability, I need a service animal, I need an ESA, an emotional support animal, please never ask them what their disability is, because a disability could be physical or could be mental. And just because a person doesn't walk with a limp, because they're not in a wheelchair, because they don't walk with a cane, does not mean that they're not disabled, right? So please never ask that question. All right, so here's your question, Ben. If the property is then rented to one person in a one bedroom, you can enforce the lease to forbid additional people from the property that are not on the lease. Great question. You can make that, and that should be in your lease. Great question. I appreciate that, Ben. You can definitely do that. Make sure that it's in writing, that you have one person that's occupying a one bedroom. They cannot add additional household members unless it is approved. They cannot add without permission or consent. Explain whatever the policy is, but make sure that it is definitely in writing. But Ben, sometimes it happens. I know that sometimes, for instance, if you have someone, maybe they were single when they moved in, right? Then all of a sudden they got involved. They started dating, and now maybe they're boothing, their significant other wants to move in, or maybe their partner, or maybe they got married, right? You just want to make sure that you have a policy in place that does address it, because Lyfe, for some of y'all, the new thing now, Lyfe just be lifing. That's a thing. You're going to hear it. You're just going to hear it. So Lyfe is just going to be lifing for so many people. Things will be one way today, Ben, and something else completely tomorrow. So definitely have it in your policy to address that. Great question. So I talked about the testers, but now let me just give you some tips on how to avoid discriminating. The first thing that I want you to know is this: treat everyone fairly and consistently. So if you have an apartment building, I'm going to come to you, Kim, because I know you manage multiple doors in South Carolina. So if you have a defined tour route, meaning that you do the same thing for all people who's interested in renting in your community, take that same tour route. Show people the same thing. So for instance, if I'm managing an apartment building, right, if there's a community room, if there's a fitness center, if there's a rooftop lounge, I'm going to take everybody the same way. It doesn't matter if they're young, if they're old, if they're black, if they're white, if they're fat, if they're skinny. It doesn't matter. I'm going to do the same thing for everybody, right? So I'm going to show them the same thing. I'm going to tell them about the same features, the benefits of the community. But now here's what I do, because I want to be fair to everybody. I'm always going to ask questions because I want to know what's important to them in a rental community. Here's the biggest mistake. Now, this is not a fair housing thing, but I do want to just add this bit of nugget, this wisdom here. One of the biggest mistakes I see landlords making is this. They'll tell the caller, the applicant, about the apartment or the home. Well, we have washer and dryer, it's a dishwasher, we offer stainless steel appliances, it's central air, it's wall-to-wall carpet, it is spacious, there are large walk-in closets, it's close to shopping, dining, and amenities. And you're telling them everything about you. You're telling them everything about the rental community. But the biggest mistake that some landlords make is they don't stop to ask the prospect or the applicant, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Applicant, what are you looking for in your rental home? What are some things that are important to you, right? And when you don't ask that question, you're not catering to their needs. Don't just be a talker, be a listener. So that's one of the things that I do like to add. And so I'm going to take everybody on a tour route, and then I'm going to pause. I'm going to ask, what are some things that are important to you in a rental home? Open it up, let them talk. Because here's the thing, if they're a tester, testers are asking questions. I want people to talk. I want people to tell me what they're looking for in their rental home, right? And those are some questions that if I talk to them over the phone, I'm asking over the phone so that I'll know how to cater the tour route to their needs. So that's going to be so important, because if you're speaking to their needs, it kind of eliminates you from saying things that maybe you said something to one person and you didn't say it to the other, or you took them on a tour route. Let's say, for instance, I'm gonna just put in this example. Let's say, for instance, you have a garden style apartment building rather. With the garden style apartment building, there's usually 3, not more than 4 floors in a garden style apartment building, right? And so let's say you have an applicant. Hey, Ms. Bell, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Where are you tuned in from? Is it Mr. Bell or Miss Bell? I want to make sure I address you correctly. Thank you so much for tuning in. Mr. and Mrs. Bell, Mr. or Miss Bell, please correct me. So here is an example. So with the garden style apartment, let's say, for instance, you have an applicant who comes to you. That's what I thought. Thank you, Mr. Bell. I wanted to correct myself. So I do have a Camille Bell as well. That's why I got a little confused. Thank you so much for tuning in from New Jersey. All right, so let me go back to my example. A garden style apartment building. You have an applicant who is interested. The apartment that is available is on the 3rd floor. There is no elevator in this building. And so you have an apartment that's on the 3rd floor. You have an apartment also on the 1st floor, but you only tell this person, this applicant who is in a wheelchair, they tell you, listen, I'm coming, but I'm in a wheelchair. And so you only show them the apartment on the 1st floor because you have a heart, you understand, oh, they're in a wheelchair. I don't want to show them anything on the 3rd floor. So I'm just going to show them something on the 1st floor because that'll be convenient for them. If you have something on the 3rd floor, tell them about the apartments that you have available, whether it's the 3rd floor, the 1st floor. If you tell someone who is not in a wheelchair about that apartment that's on the 3rd floor, please make sure that you also tell that person in the wheelchair and allow them to make the decision as to whether or not they are able or interested in that apartment on the 3rd floor. You let them tell you that they're not interested versus you making the decision or assuming that they may not be available. Listen, true story. I managed an apartment community. It had 279 apartments in that community. There was a tenant who, an applicant rather, no, it was a tenant. So it was a tenant who, when I started working in that community, the tenant lived on the top floor and her husband was in a wheelchair. And every day, her and her husband, they took the kids to school. She would get him down all those steps in the wheelchair and get them back up all those steps. And they lived on the top floor and they had lived there for years. It was mind blowing to me. I had never seen anything like it. Right. And so when something else opened up on the first floor, she was interested, but it just kind of reminded me like sometimes people will do what they need to do. And because somebody is in a wheelchair, please don't think that although there's not an elevator, that they may not take that apartment on the top floor, because maybe they will. Maybe they don't want anybody over their head, right? So please be careful to not make decisions for people. Don't steer people. Steering is a prohibited practice. That's what it's called, steering. Don't steer people to a specific apartment because you think it's going to be a better fit for them. If you have, for instance, a family who comes in, a mother with 4 kids, she tell you, I work, I have good credit, I can afford to live here. She goes through the application process. She checks off all the boxes on your list, right? Don't automatically assume that a lower apartment is the best place for her to be. And I know that sometimes, especially for those of you who have rental property, you have apartment buildings and you have had tenants in place. Maybe you have seniors or elderly or professionals in your building, and maybe they have complained about previous tenants who had children. They didn't want children running over top of their head, right? Those complaints, not to say that they're not valid. You cannot steer people to specific parts of the building just because they have children. Steering, like I said, is a prohibited practice. Make sure that you have absolute understanding of what you can and cannot do. Let me pause. I see your comment. Mr. Bell, you said you're welcome. It's okay. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for that. All right. So I'm coming back to you, Ben. You said, how do you handle questions on disability, accessibility if you have a garden style apartment, but do not have disability modifications? Great question. So along those lines, if you have an apartment that has not been conformed to ADA requirements, meaning that the doors have not been widened, your cabinets have not been lowered, you don't have like a roll-in shower for that applicant or that prospect, right? You can allow that family to make necessary modifications. You can tell them that, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Applicant, thank you so much for your interest in our 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartment. Tell them what the apartment does have. Don't tell them, you can give them the same spiel that you give everybody else. If they're interested, allow them to come out. If they ask you, do you have a ramp? Will it meet ADA requirements? And if you have not already done that, then it's not a requirement that you physically conform your apartment to meet the ADA requirement, unless that's something that you want to do. Now, if you just want to turn that apartment into a handicap accessible apartment, you absolutely can do that. Or you can make modifications. So let's say, for instance, they're asking for a grab bar, right? That's a common thing. Sometimes they'll ask for a grab bar. Sometimes they may ask if it's okay if a ramp is installed, right? So if your property is not in any type of housing program, you're not under any type of contract, you can make those modifications to your rental property, or you can give the family written consent to make those modifications with the condition that they return the property back to the original way that it was before they moved in. You can definitely do that. But if you have a rental and if they're interested, you can allow them to rent it. Don't not rent it to them because you feel like it's not going to meet their need. Let them make that decision for themselves. Let them decide that because it doesn't have extra modifications, that maybe it's not a good fit for me. If I want to rent your property, if it's not a good fit for me, I'm going to just tell you, you know what, Ben, you have a really nice property, but I'm in a wheelchair and I don't think this is going to be a good fit. Let them make that determination, not you. Great question. Thank you so much for that. Any other questions that you have, please throw it in the comment section. I'm going to answer any questions that you have today. All right, so I talked about disability. I gave examples of occupancy standard. Make sure that you understand what the occupancy standard is in your area so that when people come, you can tell them, well, hey, you can't occupy this space, and you have to know it without a doubt. You have to know it. You have to be matter of fact, because if someone say, oh, well, I wanted to rent from Ben and he discriminated against me because we have kids, and you can defend, you can stand on the occupancy standard if the property is in DC, that allowing 7 people to move into a 2-bedroom space would occupy the space, and that no, you're not discriminating because the applicant or the tenant have kids, but it's going to create an overcrowding. So please don't break the law in trying to jump through hoops, is what I'm saying. So when you know what the law is, you know what you can and cannot do, and defend that. And then also, please, if you have questions about the situation, if you think that it might be a tester, in many jurisdictions, you can contact local organizations. I know that DC has a lot of resources available in a lot of major cities around the United States. Resources are available that if you, as a landlord, a property manager, a housing provider, you can ask the question, well, listen, I had someone who came to me. I want to make sure that I am not violating fair housing laws. Can you help me out with this? And get that information. So definitely do that. You can also look up fair housing laws. So do this. Look up fair housing laws or fair housing law agencies or organizations in your jurisdiction. Look those places up. Have it on speed dial. If you have a question, give them a call. If you have a question, you can always email their office. And a lot of places are starting to do free trainings for landlords on fair housing laws. All right. So, Mr. Bell, you have a question now that I can answer? I'm going to pause for a second. If you have a question, put it in the comment section for me. Let me see if I can take a stab at your question. And then also, if you have questions when I'm not live and online, let me give you my email address. You can always email me. So let me share my email address with you. That is my email address, scrolling at the bottom of the screen there. All right, Mr. Bell, I'm going to give you a few seconds. If you have a question, put it in the comment section. I want to make sure that I'm answering your question. So please make sure that, like I said, you are complying with occupancy standards. And I know that sometimes when people are not sure, they will say and do extra because they're just not sure. But sometimes you can intend to mean well and still violate the law. All right, Ben, here's your question. How about income questions during pre-screening? Great question. So if you have, for instance, let's say you do have, okay, I see your comment, Mr. Bell. I'm gonna come to you after this. So let's say, for instance, Ben, you do have income requirements, right? So with your income requirement, make sure that it is in writing. So for instance, if you have, for instance, let's say a tax credit community, and there is a minimum and a maximum income, it is not against the law to ask them what their income is. Now, you can let them know that your application process requires you to verify income. Their income should be at least 2.5, 3, at least 3 times the amount of the rent. So if the rent is $1,000, you want to make sure that first and foremost that you are verifying that information. And so during the application process, they should verify their income. And how do they do that? With pay stubs. I will usually ask for 4 to 6 pay stubs. If they are self-employed, I will usually ask for 2 years of their tax return. I will usually ask for 6 months of their account statements, because if they're getting paid, their money should also reflect in their bank account. So Ben, here's a situation that I ran into with an applicant trying to confirm or verify income. So someone came to me, they said, well, hey, I work, here are my pay stubs. Now, I'm going to just be honest. Those pay stubs looked a little sketchy. They looked like they could have been made on Canva or somewhere like that. I was like, okay. So me being me, like I teach this, right? I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. Like, so I looked at the pay stubs and I asked the young lady for her account statements. I wanted the most recent account statements. So the pay stubs, here's where this alleged applicant made a mistake at. So the pay stubs all had the same number on it. Now, I've been in this industry for almost 30 years, right? Now, I've seen lots of pay stubs in my day, but one of the things that I do know is that if you get paid today, you get paid in 2 weeks, and you were paid 2 or 4 weeks ago, the pay stub is not going to have the same number. Okay, so I told you that the pay stubs looked a little sketchy. Now, the pay stub allegedly had a bank account that the money was being directly deposited into. So because it is part of the policy and it is in writing that we do ask for 6 months of account statements, I'm looking for that account number that lines up with the account number that's on that pay stub. The dots did not connect. And because I could not verify, I had to move on to the best qualified applicant. And so, great question, Ben. You can let them know what the policy is, and you can definitely verify income, and you should verify income because you always want to rent to people who can afford to pay the rent. Great question. All right, Mr. Bell, you said my landlord is harassing me still. Her and the inspector is bringing the maintenance guy in my apartment who grabbed my neck. You're on disability, and it is a violation. That is definitely a violation. So here's the thing. Number one, they should not be physically putting their hands on you. So that is a violation. Now, if they are entering into your home, I do question if they're entering for cases of an emergency, because sometimes, now, let me say this, because if there is an emergency, sometimes as a landlord, we may not have time to call you or to send you a letter in advance. So in some places, in some jurisdictions, landlords are required to give 24-hour notice. Others are required to give 48-hour notice. It just depends on the jurisdiction, right? So landlords are required to give notice. Now, if it's an emergency, they may not, like I said, we may not have time to give notice if it's an emergency. Maybe there's a pipe burst, or there's some sort of water emergency or fire or whatever, right? I don't know what the situation is. I don't want to go too deep in details about your specific and personal situation. And we can definitely, you can email me and I can follow with you offline. But if there was no emergency, your landlord should not have been coming in and out of your apartment without notice. And when they come in, and I know that sometimes maintenance have not, but I do know that sometimes maintenance guys or technicians, males or females, because maintenance is not all males. So let me take that off the record. So if the maintenance person comes in, if you're not home, they should leave some type of notification to say maintenance was here. They should leave a tag or a slip or something to say maintenance was here. And if that's not the situation, then that's a problem. But I would definitely recommend having a conversation with the property manager. They should not be harassing you. They should not be putting their hands on you. And if you feel like your rights are being violated, please reach out to an agency in your area. I can help you maybe look up some resources for you in Trenton, New Jersey. Please email me. I'll follow with you. But if you feel like your rights are being violated, definitely reach out to someone who could assist you with that. That should never happen. They should not be walking in and out. They should not be harassing you. They should not be putting their hands on you. And if that is continuing to happen, then you will probably do yourself a a lot of good by trying to find some sort of landlord and tenant attorney who can help guide you and give you the best legal advice on how to handle that matter, but they should definitely not be doing that. And because I'm not an attorney, I can't give you legal advice, but I can just tell you the best thing to do to handle that situation. Advertising question. When you advertise a property for rent, do you pre-screen over the phone before they can see the unit? Great question. And I'm always screening over the phone and in person. So here is an example. Someone is interested in renting my 2-bedroom. Hey, thank you so much for calling ABC Apartments today. This is Karissa. How can I help you? Hey, Karissa, I see that you have a 2-bedroom online and I'm interested in renting it. Okay, well, great. Yeah, I'm sorry. Can I ask who am I speaking with? What's your name, please? This is Mary Jane. Hey, Mary Jane, thank you so much for calling today. So you're interested in a 2-bedroom, Mary Jane? Awesome. We do have a 2-bedroom that is available for immediate move-in. The rent is $3,000. Mary Jane, I would love to show you or schedule an appointment for you to come in. How many people will be occupying this space, Mary Jane? She says, 3 people. Okay, great. Well, here is just a little bit about our rental community. We're in ABC community. We're near shopping, dining, blah, blah, blah. What are some things that are important to you, Mary Jane? Oh, I have to have a dishwasher. I need a garbage disposal. I need a fitness center. I need central air. Okay, great. And Mary Jane, how soon are you looking to move in? Oh, I'm looking to move in within the next 2-3 weeks. Okay, thank you for that, Mary Jane. I just want you to know that this apartment, like I said, it is available. I would love to schedule a tour. Can you let me know what date you're available to come in and take a look at it? So I'm going to go through that process. I'm going to ask those questions so that I can know and understand kind of sort of the dynamics, right? So I want to know how many people will live in a place. I'm telling them the rent amount. Now, if it is my policy, if it is my practice to go deeper to let them know that, hey, and I have colleagues who tell people, listen, we are looking for, in order to income qualify, we just want to make sure that you know and understand our application process, that all applicants are required to have at least 3 times the amount of income for the rent amount. So if the rent is $1,000 and the income should be $3,000, unless they are participating in some sort of housing subsidy program. Now, when it comes to a housing subsidy program, that is an income. So please always know that if someone is participating in a housing program, it could be a rapid rehousing, it could be a permanent supportive housing program, it could be a permanent housing program, it could be a local housing program, it could be a federal housing program. There are different types of housing programs on different levels. Just know that participants in those programs are protected. That is an income. Income is protected class in many places. But that is a great question. So yeah, definitely pre-screen, let them know. You can ask them, well, hey, Mary Jane, do you have any pets, right? And you can let them know that you are no pet policy. So yeah, you can definitely pre-screen. And here's why that's important, because if your community is not the best fit for them, don't waste their time. And then you get to understand and know what they're looking for and whether or not whether you and your property are a good fit for them. So I always, in my advertising, I'm talking about the property. I'm going to put in my advertising if it's a no pet community, if it's a no smoking community. I'm going to answer all those questions up front. I try to be as mindful as possible. I'm thinking about, okay, if I wanted to rent in this community, what would I want to know? Would I want to know about the security deposit? Would I want to know how much the rent is? Would I want to know the square footage? Would I want to know whether or not I can have a cat or a dog? Now, if you are no pet policy and they come to you and they say, well, I have an emotional support animal or I have a service animal, you cannot charge them for those animals because they're not pets. Emotional support animal, service animals, you cannot charge a pet deposit. You can't charge a monthly fee for it. I know that some people will try to do it. You cannot do that. All right. You will get yourself in trouble trying to charge somebody for an emotional support animal that you allow them to have. Right. But you can make sure that in addition to the documentation from their physician or medical service provider, whoever provides them with that documentation, you can also require that they provide vaccination records for that animal. Okay. Now you can also have a policy in place that will address aggressive type of animals, right? So if it's an aggressive animal, if you have one at the property, and let's say the animal is a Rottweiler and it is barking at kids or it bit someone, right? You can address that, but don't flat out deny somebody because they tell you, I have a pet. And then later they come back and be like, oh, well, it's an emotional support animal. Do your due diligence, require them to provide all that information. And then if it doesn't align, then you can address it like that. But great question. Thank you so much for that advertising question. I see your comment, Kim. All right. You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay. So Mr. Bell, you said it was for an inspection for heat. It was for an inspection for heat, but that's when I was trying to do rent escrow. She is harassing me. She gets away with it. Now, many jurisdictions, Mr. Bell, should have laws pertaining to landlords retaliating against you. So if you feel like you have been retaliated against, then definitely look into that. I don't know specifically what the law is in that area, but I would definitely look into it just to make sure that that's the case. All right, question. I'm coming back to you, Ben. Can you turn down an appointment viewing if during pre-screening they don't meet the income requirements? Great question. I love these questions. These are some good questions here. So here's the thing. If you have someone who so you have an applicant and they already scheduled the appointment. This happened to me. So I was talking to the person on the phone, and allegedly they did not have the income. They did not meet the income requirement, especially in a tax credit community, right? But then when they came in person, they actually did have the income. So that's a judgment call because maybe they do, maybe they don't. But listen, if they are way off, just let them know, listen, our income requirement, or here's one of the things that I do ask. Here's one of the things that I ask Ben. Maybe this will help you. So if there is an income requirement, right? So I'm going to go back to the tax credit community. So let's say, for instance, the minimum income is $36,000 and the maximum income is $52,000. I will say for this one bedroom that is whatever the amount of the rent is, I'll state the rent amount. I'll say that the income requirements, the minimum income must be $36,060. The maximum income cannot exceed $52,750. Then let's say, for instance, I'm talking to the applicant, Mary Jane. Mary Jane, does your income fall within that range? And if Mary Jane or that applicant says no, then you can let them know, doesn't sound like you're going to income qualify. Now, if they are dead set on coming out to look at the property, that's a judgment call. If the appointment is already scheduled, I will honor that. But if they're way off, you can let them know if your income is not within that range, if it's under that amount, then you're likely not going to income qualify. But if they're dead set on coming out, that's a judgment call. Especially if you've already said yes and they still want to see it, what's the harm? Maybe you waste 30 minutes out of your day, right? But great question. Thank you so much for that. And that is one of the qualifying questions I do ask, especially when there is an income requirement. I let them know what that range is. Now, I have some people who will still want to come and see the apartment. They still want to take a tour, although their income is not within that range. So have a policy in place on how you handle that. But that's a really great question. I'm so glad that you asked that question. Are there any other questions? Now, here's the thing that I want people to do. I want you to, I want especially landlords, please resist the urge to, we're talking about Fair Housing Month. We're talking about discriminating, right? And I'm giving you things to do so that you can avoid costly mistakes. Because if you violate these fair housing laws, if you say or do something that could put you in a hot seat, that can be extremely costly. And that's what I'm trying to help a lot of you avoid. Okay. So I hope that you're taking note, but resist the temptation to stereotype. I had a situation where this young guy came in. Well, he looked young. I don't really know his age. We didn't get that far. So this gentleman, he came in and he didn't have a polished look. He just looked like the average guy who lived in that neighborhood around the corner, right? Who hang out on the corner just doing whatever, right? And so the guy who came in, he kind of looked like the neighborhood guys, right? And so in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, this is a neighborhood guy, right? Because he fit the mold of the neighborhood guys. So in my mind, I'm thinking it, but of course, I can't say that. I can look and make an assessment, but I cannot make a judgment. I cannot decline an application. I cannot just flat out say, oh, well, I'm not going to show you the rental property. I'm not going to show you an apartment because you look like a neighborhood guy and you're probably one of them. Even though he might fit the mold of what some would say or potentially perceive as a thug, it doesn't matter. Right. And so, like I said, in my mind, I was thinking it, but I still had to go through that process. I had to go through the process. Now, turns out he claimed he had good credit. He was a working professional and he just liked to dress down on his off day. So please don't stereotype people. Even if you think it, because here's the thing, we are human. And just because we think it, that's one thing. We just can't, as a professional, we can't act on those things. Now, I would be lying if I said that sometimes people don't have those strong thoughts about people, because we do as humans. Sometimes we have strong thoughts about people. It's just that you cannot act on it. You can't make a decision for people based off of what you think or a perception, or because of how they look, how they dress, right? Which is one of the reasons why I tell tenants to, one of the things that I do, and we can't tell people how to live, how to dress, but I tell people, especially tenants, watch how you dress, right? Because people who don't tune into me, people who don't know the right thing to do, at first glance, they'll look at someone with their pants sagging. Doesn't matter if it's a male or female. They'll look at someone who may not be dressed like they're a professional, right? They may not be extremely polished in their look and their posture and their talk. And they may even smell like weed, right? So I tell tenants, listen, be careful of how you look, because people will form a judgment, they will form an opinion, and will potentially discriminate based off of what they see. I also tell tenants, please be mindful when you have children, and although it is against the law for landlords to discriminate against applicants or prospects with kids, sometimes people will do it, especially when the children's behavior is off. Be mindful of these things. Now, of course, I also tell tenants it's not what they know, it's what they can prove. And so just because someone declined the application, it could be discrimination. Maybe it's not discrimination, but don't put themselves in a situation to make a landlord make a judgment based off of that. But let me just get back to landlords. Don't stereotype. That's the whole point. Don't stereotype. Okay. So I wanted to share this information. I know I went a little over in time. I usually don't go this long. But again, April, the month of April is National Fair Housing Month. I want you to avoid costly mistakes. And discrimination is not always intentional. It's sometimes those unintentional things that can get you caught up. All right. So I shared a few tips. Monday, I'm going to come back. I'm going to share some more. I'm going to share case scenarios because, like I said, I've been in this industry for a while. I'm a educator, and there are a lot of things that happen. I'm here to answer questions that you have, whether I'm live, whether you want to email me. But the month of April, that is all I'm talking about. But I will answer questions. And so if you have questions, I'm here to answer those questions for you. I hope that something that I shared today was helpful, was of value. I'm going to come back. I'm going to share some more. Hey, Ronnie G, thank you for tuning in. You said how to prevent a tenant who has turned a unit into a nuisance unit. For example, multiple people coming, going, sleeping, bags of clothes, basically a flop house, a drug haven. A flop house, some people call that a trap house. Great question. So how do you handle that? Here's how you handle it. First of all, one thing that I always do is I would look at what is in writing. What's in my lease? Does my lease address this behavior? Does it talk about people who are not on the lease? Does it talk about it being a flop house or a drug haven? And again, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. So please make sure that it's in the lease. Document it. If you have documentation, that beats conversation any day. That's one of the things that I always say. When you see something, say something. I would definitely address it with the tenant. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, we notice that you have a lot of people hanging in and out of the property. Just want to remind you that in accordance to the terms of your rental lease agreement, that it is a violation. Are these guests temporary? Are they living here? Now, sometimes they may be truthful, sometimes they may not be truthful, right? But here is a perfect example of someone who is not truthful and someone who is living in a property. So say, for instance, Ronnie G, you go to the property to conduct an inspection and you see mail of someone who is not on the lease. That's an indicator that they are using that rental property as their address. That is your proof. Now, you cannot take their mail. Okay, I don't want you to think that you can do that, but you can always address what you see. You see something, say something, document it. If you have pictures, I have colleagues of mine who have Ring cameras and they see people coming in and out. This one colleague of mine, they have Ring cameras all around all of their apartment buildings. And they see the videos of the significant other going up and down the stairs, up and down the stairs. The significant other has a key to the rental property. And it's those sort of things that they can use as evidence, but you have to take them to court, address it, have a soft conversation with them. Don't ruffle their feathers, right? But do definitely address it. And if it is a violation of the lease, then by all means, issue a notice, take them to court. And then if you have legal questions, I would definitely recommend contacting a reputable landlord and tenant attorney. But that's how I would handle it. When I see something, I say something. I recently did an inspection this past weekend, and it was a situation where the head of household had a significant other who was not on the lease. Now, the head of household told the owner, oh, well, that's my babysitter, right? But when I did the inspection, the babysitter was a significant other and was taking lead in the conversation and allowing me to, was asking questions and was involved and, was allowing me to ask them questions and stuff like that. And so sometimes that happens. I always say you can catch more bees with honey than you can with vinegar. And so sometimes when you take a softer approach, you can generally ask questions and they'll answer your questions. But if you come down hard, like with the iron fist, and you just out for blood and just out for war, they're likely not going to cooperate with you. They're not going to give you any information that you're looking for. But have those soft conversations to see what the situation is. But if it's a problem, if it's a nuisance property and you have other neighbors who can write a letter to confirm and testify that that is the situation, then definitely follow up on that. Maybe also consider this. if you feel like it's a problem property where crime and things have been taking place at the property, you can always contact the police department. Let them know, hey, listen, I'm the owner of ABC Apartments and anywhere in the United States. I would like to know if there are any police reports that may be associated with this property, right? And see if there is a history, a paper trail, if you will, of crime that's taken place. If the police has been called for fighting, assault, or loud music, or whatever, right? That's one of the things that you can do, and by creating that paper trail, that will help you if and when you decide to take that tenant to court. So great question. Thank you so much for that, Ronnie G. And thank you for tuning in. So as it pertains to the drug haven piece, I would definitely reach out to the local police department to see if there could be some increase in police activity of that rental property. I do know that things happen, right? But again, it's not what we know, it's what we can prove. And so talk to your local police authority and don't stop until you get some sort of response. Because in many cases, see, here's the thing. Sometimes you have not because you ask not. And I know I'm bringing this to a close, but I managed a troubled community one time, and it was so bad that they were conducting drive-by shootings in broad daylight in that rental community. But I was not afraid to walk the community. I was out there. I had, and I petitioned for the police, for more police presence to get involved. Like, we literally walked the community. We knocked on doors. Because one of the things that I am going to do is I have a heart for people, and sometimes the bad seeds can make it really, really bad for most of the tenants who are there. Sometimes tenants are scared. The good ones, they're afraid to say something. They don't want to call the police. And so I had to take a step above and contact the local authorities. I had to make several calls, several complaints. Hey, listen, this is a high crime area. I have shootings that are taking place in broad daylight. Listen, I've shared this before. True story. I was managing a community, and I was walking across the courtyard, and two guys, they pulled out guns, like one on my left, one on my right. They pulled out guns, and like they were going to shoot each other. Like, I'm caught like in the middle, right? And so when you have those type of situations, definitely request police presence. Because here is the thing. Here's the danger in not requesting help. If your rental community, your rental home, it's so plagued with violence, with drugs, and you have not made any documented attempts to try to resolve the situation, it could come against you, right? I have seen situations where landlords were slammed, hit hard because of the crime that was taking place on or about their rental community. So definitely send emails, attend if there are local community meetings, PSA, ANC commissioner meetings, community meetings that are taking place. Join those meetings, attend those meetings, complain about what's going on in your rental community, right? Because you're showing, hey, listen, this is what's happening. I want to be a good landlord and try to get ahead of this. How can we come together to make a difference? How can we help change what's happening in the rental community? Because we can't change people, but if you come together, you can get more. You can accomplish more when you work with others. And so together is better. So yoke up with others who are in your community, the local law enforcement, police department, and don't be afraid to ask for help. If you need help in your rental communities, ask for it. Because if you don't, people will complain against you because it's your rental property and you are allowing these people in the community, and it's because of your rental property and you not doing anything that makes it bad for everybody else that lives in the community. Don't let them say that about you. Seek help, get some help. Great question. Listen, guys, ladies and gentlemen, my time is up and I thank you for yours. Again, I do hope that this was helpful. The entire month, every Monday. Was today the 15th? So next Monday when I come back, I'm going to talk about more practices, things for landlords to avoid, costly things, costly mistakes for landlords to avoid during National Fair Housing Month. I hope this was of value. Let me also share my email address again, because I want you to be able to contact me. That is my email address at the bottom of the screen there. Feel free to email me, okay? So next week, 7:30 p.m., live on Facebook, live on LinkedIn, live on YouTube. I am Karissa Spann, the abundantly blessed landlord and tenant expert. I look forward to seeing you all next week. Oh, also, if you have not already subscribed to my YouTube channel, please find me over on YouTube, Landlord Life with Karissa Spann. You can find me there. You can watch replays. And again, you have my email address, and you can find me live right here next Monday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Listen, guys, have an amazing week. All right. I'll see you all next week. I'm going to say bye for now.